YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. This is a knife that I've had for a while, I've been using for a bit, and I've actually been pretty impressed with. This is the Ganzo 710. Now, this is essentially, for size and shape, it's a copy of the Benchmade Rift. And not, Ganzo's not fooling anyone. They're not trying to say it isn't. They just, it's a Benchmade Rift copy. Now, they don't sell it as a Benchmade Rift. They don't try to fool anyone. They call it a Ganzo 710, so you don't think you're buying a Rift or anything like that. Further, the materials, the construction, they're different. And I'll give you one reference point on that. Obviously, the blade steel, which you can see is 440C. There's the model number there, the 710. But the axis lock is a perfect example. On a Benchmade, the axis lock works so easily and so smoothly that you can easily manipulate the lock with one finger. None of the knives that I've gotten from China, either a Renmu or an Enlin or a Ganzo, the axis lock does not work as nicely on any of those. Now, it does deploy quickly if you need it to. I'll see if I can get that on camera. There you go. It is pretty fast deploying. And so if you really are in a situation where, boy, you want your knife out quickly, you can certainly do that. And in that sense, it functions like other axis locks. They are known to be fairly fast deploying mechanisms. But it's just not a Benchmade. So we're going to kind of put that to bed. I don't think anyone's buying a Ganzo 710 and saying, oh, now I don't need a Benchmade Rift. I don't think they're cutting into Benchmade sales or anything like that. And so because of that, I have no real issue with this. Further, they're not lying to anyone. I do take a real issue when a company claims something that isn't true. They're not claiming this is a Rift. They're not trying to deceive anyone in any way. And so I have no issue with that. Now, let's move into the knife itself, because on its own merits, this is actually a pretty good knife. It's not intended to be a high-end knife like the Benchmade Rift. It's intended to be an affordable EDC knife, and I think it nails that category. Really, really does. So let's talk about that. First, the size and weight on this thing. This knife is just over like 8 1/8 inches long, so just over 8 inches. The blade is 3.5 inches. The handle width is 1/2 inch. It may be just a little over, like a 32nd over. You can barely see, if you put this down on a measuring tape, you can barely see that it's going just a little past the 1/2 inch line. It's 5.4 ounces, which is a little heavy for an everyday carry knife, but not outlandish. And because if you've watched any of the other videos, that I own knives and have carried knives and recommended knives that are heavier than that. So it's not the end of the world as far as I'm concerned. Now, see if I can give you a good close-up shot of the knife there. There's the blade, there's the handle. For that 5.4 ounces, what are you getting? Well, let's start here with the blade. The blade is 3.5 inches of 440 steel. It's a partial flat grind with a swedge on the top. And actually, this spot is, there's sort of this little cutout here that works perfectly for a thumb rest, and you can do a lot of good cutting with your hand in this position. Very comfortable. 440C is, of course, not a high-end steel, probably even a step down from 8CR13 MOV, but my experience has been this knife holds an edge reasonably well. If you don't have the capacity to sharpen, get a sharpener, right? Everyone has a whole bunch of knives, and to think you're going to buy a knife and not have to sharpen it is a pipe dream, even if it's, S30V or 154 CM or some of the higher end steels that are known to hold an edge better. Nothing holds an edge forever, and so you need to have the capacity to sharpen your knives if you own a knife. There we go. What else do you want to know about this blade? Oh yeah, the reverse Tonto blade. This is a fairly popular blade shape. Warren Osborne does it in a lot of his blades, the Contigo, the Rift, the 440, or with the 340 maybe. All those Warren Osborne Benchmades have this reverse Tanto, and it's a pretty cool design because you get that extra length to the end of your knife, which gives you strength and stabbing penetration ability. And Not Fancy, in his review of the Rift, does a bunch of stabbing to demonstrate how effective that is. But unlike a normal Tanto style blade, you don't sacrifice the ability to slice. And so this is going to be a good slicer as well as a good penetrating blade. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. Now what you don't get, of course, is that secondary tip. You have a belly here instead of a hard tip on the knife. And that secondary tip, as I've said before, is actually pretty useful. So, you know, with both things, you're getting benefits. You have to decide whether, you know, if you're going to go with a blade shape that's like this, whether or not you prefer to have the secondary tip for utility tasks, or whether a blade with a belly like that is something that you find more appealing if you're doing a lot of slicing, food prep, stuff like that. So that's worth thinking about. Of course, this is a satin finish. I haven't found it in any other finish other than satin finish, but it's a very nicely finished blade. And I think in general, I prefer a satin finish. There are a few knives that I have that have some kind of either gray or black coating. And in a particular knife style, I may prefer that, but generally I prefer a satin finish on a knife. I feel like, you know, it's made of steel. Why don't you let the world know that you're made of steel? Make it look like a nice, finely finished cutting tool. The handle, which is the next thing we want to talk about, is actually pretty nice. Now, there are a couple of drawbacks here. This is one of the areas. Now, the 440C blade steel obviously is a big separation from Benchmade's, whatever the Rift is made out of, probably 154 cm. Benchmade uses that a lot. It is thumb stud deployed, and as we're moving down the handle, that's how the deployment works. It's very smooth. I can kind of demonstrate here. Just a little shake, and you can see that falls down. And you can, as many axis locks are famous for, open and close the knife if you deactivate the lock. So that's interesting to know that the blade, you know, if you got an axis lock where the blade wasn't smooth enough, that would suck because you couldn't close the knife that way. But deployment is very good. There's no blade play, although this will do something that a lot of axis locks will do. If you kind of gently engage the lock and you don't like kind of snap it into place, you can get a little bit of blade play, because what's happening is this bar that locks the blade into place isn't fully engaged. As it fully engages, there you go. Now the blade play goes away. So you need to know about that. And I'm sure now, probably on a Benchmade, a lot of my other Chinese produced knives that have axis locks do the same thing. The lock here doesn't always engage fully into the tang of the blade, and you may have to give it a little push. Or if you engage the knife with your thumb and let the lock pop into place, it always locks up properly. And even if it doesn't, it's not that it's not locked, it's just that this is not fully tightly engaged into the blade, and so you can get a little bit of blade play, and it'll go away if you just move the blade a little bit, or if you just re-engage the lock. I don't know, I don't have a lot of Benchmade axis locks. My Barrage, of course, locks up perfectly with no blade play all the time, and you'd expect that from a higher end blade, where you wouldn't maybe expect it from something of this nature, which is not a high-end blade at all. Carrying on through the handle, it is G10, and it's very grippy G10. There's sort of a ramp here with some jimping on it, and so, you know, I'm not at all concerned. This is a very, very grippy knife, and it's actually a pretty comfortable knife. The width of the handle, anything that gets up to around ½ an inch, you've got enough width there that you can push pretty hard on things and not feel a lot of discomfort with it. So it's G10, axis lock, Torx bit construction, very comfortable in its ergonomics, and this is a real user knife. If you're going to really get a knife that you want to beat on, I would suggest this is a good knife for that. It is 2-position pocket clip, and it has a great big lanyard hole. And in fact, because the pocket clip is there for tip-up carry, the lanyard hole is in a perfect position that the lanyard can come out of your pocket a little bit and actually help you retrieve that knife out of your pocket if you need that. I don't have a lanyard on this knife, but I think it would actually look good with one maybe in like an olive drab or a green with that black and satin. I think it'd look pretty sharp. Just checking if I've missed anything here. I don't think so. We mentioned this jimping. Oh yes, the one thing I did want to mention in terms of the handle. These liner locks are very full liner locks. They're thick piece of steel, and they're not milled out at all in any way, which makes this knife fairly heavy. That's why it breaks that 5-ounce mark. If you were so inclined, you could probably do a project, pull this knife apart, and drill out those liners yourself to save, you know, half an ounce or something. And maybe that's something you want to pursue. But those liners are not milled out in any way, so you're definitely getting some weight. Overall, what I want to say about this blade is for a very reasonable price, and you can find these for less than $30, right at $30. I think this one was $27 with free shipping, so pretty good price there. And for that $27, you're getting an extremely capable blade. It's a blade that is nice to carry, it's nice to use. You know, everything that you would look for in an EDC blade, this thing definitely delivers. It's not high end. I would call this a value folder for sure. And when you talk about a value folder, what you want to think about is, am I really getting value? And I think in this blade you really are. The steel is maybe a little less than what you'd like it to be in 440C, but if you know how to sharpen a knife, I don't think you're going to have an issue. And heat treatment makes all the difference when it comes to 440C, and I haven't had any issues with this knife holding an edge. I have had knives where it seems like every time I cut anything, they're dull and you've got to resharpen it, and that's so frustrating. That's not been the case with this blade at all. It does hold an edge reasonably well, obviously not as well as S30V or something like that, but it's nothing to sneeze at either. So overall, very, very good EDC blade. Good fit and finish, good quality, good comfort and usefulness, good blade, you know, everything that you look for in an everyday carry knife, with maybe a minor hit for being just a little bit heavy, but not so heavy that it's unreasonable. And keep in mind, you only paid $27, so you know, you can't expect perfection in every aspect, but it's a pretty good blade, and certainly one that you wouldn't be disappointed with if you needed something to carry with you all the time. That's my take on the Ganzo 710, a very good knife at a very reasonable price.